Welcome to Hey, Great Shot. This is the Great Shot Podcast, a Cracked Racquets and Tennis Channel Podcast Network production. My name is Alex Gruskin. On today's show, we've got another episode of The Deciding Point, our weekly breakdown of all the action happening across the Division I college tennis world. Of course, here on Tuesday nights, we talk about the Division I women's action, and what a week we just had unfold before us in the college tennis world. It was conference championship time. And on today's show, we'd like to recognize the conference champions that emerged throughout the course of the week. In particular, on today's show, we'll focus on the Power 5 conference tournaments and all of the implications that came from the past week of action. In particular, right away, got to give a shout out to our Big 12 conference tournament champion, Texas. Are they the hottest team in the country? That's something we can discuss today. Of course, a team going to be right up there with them, Texas A&M, completing an undefeated SEC, both regular season and conference tournament. That does not happen too frequently. We'll talk about A&M. Are they a tier one team now? Are there any tier one teams heading into the NCAA tournament? That's something we can discuss. Of course, Pac-12 champs, Stanford, ACC champs, Duke. We'll get into all of that. And of course, the themes of today's show are going to be about the chaos that reigned across the country over the course of the past week. Again, is there a definitive favorite for the NCAA title at this point? We had 3 number 1 seeds and regular season champs in their conference fail to win the conference tournament. Again, these are the themes we want to discuss on today's show as we try to prepare all of you college tennis fans for the next month of May Madness, for the next month of the NCAA tournament. And of course, if we're going to try and do that here at Cracked Racquets, I better have someone to help me along the way. Thankfully, I do each and every week on this show. And I do once again today, as joining me on the podcast, as he does every Tuesday night, is a returning champion here on our Cracked Racquets shows. Of course, your co-favorite writer on our website, crackedrackets.com, founder of the No Ad, No Problem blog, and of course, our West Coast correspondent here for all things college tennis. It's our friend, John J. Parsons. Jay, hey, great shot. Welcome back to the show. I don't know if you can smell that in the air out at Stanford, but I'm smelling postseason play in the air. You're getting the vibes. You're getting the energies, the nervousness, the 4-3 results. It feels like it's postseason time here in the 2022 college tennis season.
Yeah, it's starting to feel like May, right? And this is our last deciding point before we have the NCAA draws. How crazy is that?
That just sunk in.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're there. We made it.
Well, yep, we're there. Next week, we'll be talking about the draws. So, I mean, thinking about the show this week, you think, there's a few key results over the weekend. You just look at the conference championships this weekend. I mean, it's like 20 results, 30 results we could actually dive in on. There was so much action this weekend. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday was jam-packed. So many different results, and things kept falling and chaos reigned.
And clearly that is going to be a theme, again, of the next month of play. If you are expecting a straightforward NCAA tournament, you just haven't been paying attention to the college tennis action we've seen unfold over the course of this season. And again, shout out to John, who sends an outline to myself and super producer Daniel Westoff every week. What we're going to do to organize ourselves through some of this chaos is break down each of those Power 5 conference tournaments, but try to keep things focused. So, of course, we'll talk about the finals at length. Then we'll talk about our match of the tournament. Jay and I may disagree in that category. We'll offer 3 non-finals takeaways and so much more. Again, it's a jam-packed show. Appreciate all of you who are joining us live on our YouTube channel here. And if you haven't, as Jay mentioned, not that many shows to go. So 9 p.m. Eastern time every Tuesday on our YouTube channel, we talk about the women. Thursdays, 7 p.m. Eastern time, we talk about the men. Of course, the reason we're able to do that week in, week out here at Cracked Racquets is because of the support we get from all of you. And again, coaches, players, fans, we remain immensely grateful that so many of you in the college tennis community have embraced what we're trying to do here at Cracked Racquets. I'll tell you this, we've got a gem of a Cracked Interviews podcast for all of you this week, as I am joined by perhaps the greatest of club tennis alumni, SMU men's tennis head coach Grant Chen, to talk about his team's run through an undefeated conference season, but perhaps more importantly, just big picture items in college tennis. Grant Chen, a guy who has dedicated so much time to growing the sport, not only within the college tennis framework, but beyond as well. It's a fun conversation that I know all of you listeners are going to enjoy. Of course, again, have to give a shout out to our friends at SwingVision and Turna as well. And you all know the deal. SwingVision's on the forefront of all artificial intelligence innovations happening within the sport, and you can have access to those innovations on your phone as you can download the SwingVision app today. When you do, you're going to have access to data that you've never had before from your tennis game. All you got to do, download the app, set it up. While you hit, it will record your session, break down all the film for you. Errors, winners, forehands, backhands, you name it, it'll show it to you. You can learn more about the SwingVision app by clicking on the link in the description to this podcast or listening to my conversation with SwingVision CEO Swapnil Sahai on the Cracked Interviews podcast feed today. When you sign up, make sure you use that promo code CRACK20. You'll get a $20 discount, a 14-day pro trial as well. Again, click on the link in the description of this podcast to learn more. Of course, a huge shout out to our friends at Turna as well, who've been supporting this show for quite a bit of time. And we're immensely grateful for that fact because we like to be associated with those names synonymous with success in tennis. And I think all of us know at least one person who's using Turna grips on their racket. But did you know Turna's got more than just grips, folks? They've got strings and so many more things that can help accentuate the finer features of your game. To join the Turna team today, you contact sales@uniquesports.com. Mention we sent you. You'll get discounted pricing, free samples. They'll treat you like family. Again, contact sales@uniquesports.com today to join the Turna family. With all of that said, Jay, let's get into all the action.
Before we get into
I like
it.
A little juice. Is it trivia?
It's not trivia. That's later on.
Okay.
Grant Chen, clearly in the Club Tennis Hall of Fame. Where does the Gruskin resume stack up?
Great question. I'm glad that's where we're starting here today and on the precipice of our 5-year anniversary of the title. I mean, I feel like this whole month I have the right to bring it up. Max Kohler, volunteer assistant at Oklahoma men's tennis. He deserves a shout out because certainly he's taken club tennis status to certain heights. I like to think the three of us are on the Mount Rushmore.
I was going to say, are you on the Rushmore?
When they let me, so I got really mad at my little brother, who is currently a sophomore at Penn, for not playing club tennis nationals this year. He was busy, I don't know, with a real world thing, which I get. But I told him when his team makes nationals, I will full court press the USTA to let me do the club tennis national championships. Let me come down there to Orlando for the broadcast. Once I add that feather to the cap, then I think it's Mount Rushmore status. I don't know if I'm quite there yet. And I'm definitely I'm sure in 2003, not Martin Blackman, but the non-playing equivalent of Martin Blackman in the USTA organization, maybe he played club tennis or she played club tennis as well.
Okay. So we're Rushmore adjacent. We'll keep that in mind.
I'm like a docent at a minimum, and they're debating what to do with my face. But with that said, let's talk about the college tennis action, the serious championships we saw unfold over the course of the past week. Although, shout out to UCLA, back-to-back club tennis championships. That doesn't happen too frequently, and that is tennis on campus. And it does involve college tennis. And I imagine a lot of listeners to this podcast in college who are not playing may perhaps participate in the club tennis programs on their campus. So I don't hate this shout out ever, but let's shout out all of our Power 5 conference champs. And I think the conference we want to start with is the Big 12, because I do think you can make an argument that Texas comes into the NCAA tournament in as good of form as any team in the country. And this Texas team earns its signature victory of the season, as you see on the headline on our screen. Nobody beats the defending NCAA champs thrice in a season as Texas knocks off Red River rival Oklahoma 4-2. I mean, I think the place we have to start with this match and the storyline for this Texas team, sometimes, especially, obviously they've got the depth component. We'll get into that. But sometimes when you have the best player in the country, that player can just have a day where they take over on the court and everything they touch is gold. And that team's performance, that player's performance spearheads everything else the team does. It was one of those days for Peyton Stearns, who, of course, entered the weekend as the number 2 player in the country. She's yet to drop a match on the dual match season.
She's
Oh, and
she's lost once.
She's lost once. Excuse me. Thank you. You're right. Again, this is why we love you, Jay. 0-0 over Lane Sleeth, which, again, Sleeth is a grinder. Sleeth is someone who's going to sink her teeth into a match. She's just going to make you work physically. She did not have a weapon to hurt Peyton Stearns with on this day. This was one of those days where that Peyton Stearns serve forehand combination dictated everything from the start to finish of this match. And for what it's worth, it's worth mentioning for Peyton Stearns, who is now partnered with Zamaripa at the number 1 doubles spot. They've climbed up to number 15 in the country. They earn a 6-3 win over the Corleys as well. Shavatapan gets a win over Guzman. Kylie Collins gets a win over Carmen Corley. This NCAA championship winning core for Texas, they're getting hot at exactly the right moment. Tell me why, is there any argument? Like, aren't they as hot as any team in the country right now?
I mean, they're certainly one of the hottest teams, right? I mean, more so than just winning the Big 12 championship, but obviously the manner in which they did it, right? I mean, we're just focusing on the final right now, but Peyton Stearns lost 5 games in her 3 matches. That 0-0 win over Sleeth was preceded by an 0-1 victory over Oklahoma State. So just pretty outlandish. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're the hottest team right now. They're starting to hit their stride. Certainly a great win for Shavatapan, who had struggled throughout the season. But those 3 are obviously hitting their stride in terms of Shavatapan and Collins, both about 9-2 since, I believe, that Oklahoma match. So they're playing well. Level of competition hasn't been as strong during the end of their regular season, but they blitzed through this tournament, and they were just dominant in singles and in doubles as well. But singles was extremely impressive. And you've talked about this kind of all season. Like, when you have that nucleus who has the experience of winning the NCAAs and that postseason experience, they absolutely showed that off at this tournament.
Yeah, and again, did Zainalova earn her first loss of the season? She did. 3-1 at the number 3 spot to a fellow freshman in Janta, but she's still 17-1 overall on the season. To your point, Stearns 20-1, but she's won 12 in a row. And again, after struggling all at the beginning of the season, Charlotte Shavatapan now 7-2 in her last 10, 13-8 overall in the year, 10-3 at that number 4 spot. But, again, for her this past week, played some exceptional tennis and a 4-2 win over Dana Guzman, epitomizing that fact. I mean, this team has always had the depth, and for them, I think a big result, one of the quiet ones, for Vrutsky to go 3 sets with Emma Staker. I mean, again, to continue that rivalry of the Texas 6 versus Emma Staker. Staker's as good of a number 6 singles as you're going to find in the country. And clearly Texas, every time they've played Oklahoma, has been competitive at that spot. You also look for this Texas team. They may not have been a perennial top 5 team in our conversations throughout the course of the year, but let's be clear. They're 20-4. 2 of those losses to Oklahoma. One of them 4-3 on the road, a match they had again, they very easily could have won that match. The other loss
against NC State, you're talking about.
What did I say? Oklahoma?
You didn't say anything.
That was against Oklahoma. Excuse me. I'm in their road match. That was one of their 2 losses.
Oklahoma. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, excuse me.
They had match points. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. They have match points.
Yep.
They're right there. They could have won one of them. They ultimately beat Oklahoma this past weekend to get over that hump. NC State, 4-3 loss on the road. Yeah, NC State struggled of late, but that was when NC State was right in the midst of their stride. And to go there and lose 4-3 on the road, not a bad loss. The fact that the argument that this team's worst loss, you could say, is a 5-2 loss at Stanford, which traditionally, no one wins at Stanford. So I don't think that's a bad loss either. This team's really good, and they've earned some signature victories now to beat Oklahoma State during the Big 12 regular season, who's a top 10 team, to beat this Oklahoma team that had just had their number throughout the course of the year. And then, again, big 4-3 win at Baylor as well at the end of the regular season. All of the parts are hitting their stride. And again, you look for this Texas team, for them to go through this weekend, take the doubles point over Oklahoma, but drop the doubles point against Oklahoma State, still find the 4 singles victories they need, all of them coming in straight sets. And the most games they lost in singles against Oklahoma State was 3 in an individual match. I mean, That's domination. You don't do that unless you're in the NCAA conversation. And with all of the faltering in the ACC, why not pick the team that's got the 3 players that have done this before in May?
Yeah, I think it's a really valid argument. Certainly doubles has come to fruition. I remember writing about that Oklahoma Texas Stanford match. And one of the things that had been an Achilles heel for Texas outside of some of their singles was doubles. And they just hadn't found the pairings. They've experimented so much this season. They've now taken the past 2 doubles points against Oklahoma, both in identical fashion, a tiebreak at number 2, but they're finding doubles. They're finding success with the pairings. That makes this a tough team to beat, because finding 4 singles off of this team with the close to lock you're going to have with Peyton Stearns at number 1, it's a challenging ask for any team in the country.
Yeah. And again, I do think for this Oklahoma team, for it to be Stearns and Shavatapan playing as well as they did throughout the course of the week, I think that's a really big note for this group. And again, you're starting to see what a match calculus could look like for this team. They're 39-18 overall in individual double sets on the years. They're figuring their things out. That is for sure one of the biggest takeaways from the week. And on the flip side, we've talked about Oklahoma so much this season. I'm writing off the Sleeth loss, 0-0. That has everything to do with Peyton Stearns. That has nothing to do with my confidence in Lane Sleeth, who I will go to war with 10 out of 10 days of the, 7 out of 7 days of the week. I was going to say 10 out of 10. Hey, great shot. 7 of the days of the week. And, again, Shanta gets a win at the number 3 single spot. Staker was doing her thing at 6. The match hasn't started until the third set begins for Emma Staker. There is no panic. There is no concern about this Oklahoma team heading into May. We talk about it all the time. Do you know how hard it is to beat a team twice, let alone 3 times throughout the course of the season? They've just seen everything, and to lose the first 2, particularly to lose the one at Oklahoma in the fashion that they did, this is the match Texas has been circling since losing that 4-3 match in Norman earlier this season. I don't even think we need to entertain the big picture panic button question. It's just simply a matter of, again, as you look for this Oklahoma team, I'm not worried about the doubles either. It's just, what do I do with Dana Guzman, Ivana Corley, Pisareva, all these different pieces? What do I want to do if you're Coach Cohn? It's a good question to face, but now the NCAA tournament's about to begin, and I do think it's a bit of a question.
Well, yeah, let's be clear. This match was decided by a few points in the doubles tiebreak, right? If that goes a different way, we're talking about a third set with Emma Staker again.
And exactly. And we've been there before.
We've been there before. The margins between these two teams are clearly very, very slim. They didn't get the win today. You play that match 10 times, going to be probably different every time. So my biggest questions for Oklahoma is, what are we doing with Ivana Corley and Dana Guzman? Ivana Corley, MVP at indoors, 8-0 in both singles and doubles. They're only playing one at one time. They're neither of these are Tim Siebert here. They're both extremely qualified players. It's a little strange. So I don't know if it's a matchup thing. That's been interesting. Doubles wasn't as good at this tournament as they have been throughout the season. The Corleys, I think, lost twice there. That is a bummer for them. So I think you work on doubles. You feel confident that you can find 3. And if you need to, 4 singles. I don't feel any different about this Oklahoma team than I did coming into the tournament.
I completely agree with you. They're still tier 1 in my mind. Here's the question. We talked about looking big picture, sifting through this chaos to try and make some sense heading into May. Is this Texas team tier 1 now for you?
Yeah, I think tier 1 has expanded, right?
Yeah.
So.
Or has it expanded, or do we have to change our definition?
Well, the definition is national title contender.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You like to play with the definitions.
No, I agree. and I do think Texas unequivocally belongs in that conversation. Now, they've played their way into it.
100%, right? If they continue to play good in doubles, if Shavatapan keeps showing up, that is a tough out for any team at 4. You're going to have, this is a 3-point team, right? And Collins on any given day can beat anyone. Look, can they repeat that performance? Well, they did it last year, right? That's the big question. The Texas we saw at this Big 12 championship was the Texas we saw at the NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. Can they repeat that? Was this the weekend? We'll have to see.
And here's the massive victory. Oklahoma always going to stay at that number 2 spot. They were too good at the indoors, too good through the Big 12 regular season where they ran the gauntlet undefeated. They're still number 2 in the country following this loss. Texas is up to 3 in the projected rankings with their victory. That's massive. And I mean, they're going to be top 8 for certain, which means you get to host your first 3 rounds in Austin. And again, to be a top 3 seed now, perhaps instead of in Oklahoma State or an Ohio State in that round of 16, you're going to face perhaps a Florida or a UCLA or a Stanford, one of those teams instead. And boy, what a Texas-Stanford rematch. I'm thinking about that now. Right now, I believe Stanford currently in the projected rankings, they're number 15. That would be a fun rematch. Yeah, that would be the one we deserve this time in Austin. But yeah, I agree with you. Oklahoma unequivocally still tier 1. Texas is the big story. They jumped their way into that conversation. Now we look at the rest of this Big 12 conference tournament, and certainly, again, plenty of other results we could talk about. Semifinals, again, Oklahoma State takes the doubles point, but Texas routs them in the singles. And again, I think this has more to do with Texas than it does with Oklahoma State. The big news, Kansas, 4-1 win over Baylor. I mean, again, it's one match in the big picture of things, but you look right now at the Big 12 conference, talk to me about your match of the tournament. Talk to me about your takeaways from this event.
Yeah, well, overall, the Big 12 was a little more quiet in terms of results. The matches of the tournament for me, again, finals excluded here, was Oklahoma State beating Texas Tech. That was a 4-3 win. And, that was close. I mean, those 6 matches, I believe were mostly in straight sets, but, doubles really decided that match. It told me that this Texas Tech team originally early in the season, I think we had higher hopes for. They've struggled, but they've come on strong towards the end of the year, and to play Oklahoma State should give them a lot of confidence heading into NCAAs.
Yeah, I mean, 7 of the 10 Big 12 teams are going to get into the NCAA tournament, and even like Kansas State, TCU battling for that final positioning at the end. Kansas State gets one of the wins they need. Unfortunately, obviously, weren't able to knock off Oklahoma in the quarterfinals. But yeah, I mean, I do think if Kansas, which you look right now at the rankings, they're number 25 in the projected rankings. That's a frisky number 2 seed wherever they're going to get sent. Obviously, Oklahoma State's going to be a top 16 seed, and they played an exceptional Big 12 season. Have been really, really good since turning healthy. Again, since getting fully healthy, 18-5 overall on the year. If Baylor beats Miami in the kickoff weekend, maybe we're talking about this Baylor team completely differently. And right now they're 26 in the projected rankings. But again, that's going to be a 2 seed with a ton of veteran talent. And Iowa State, they hold seed, they get to the quarter, they do what they were supposed to do throughout the course of the season. They're going to be interesting to finally get to see on the national stage. Texas Tech teams always scrappy at this portion of the season. Do you think we get 3 Big 12 Sweet 16 teams, or do you think we get more?
I would go with 3.
Yeah, you think it's just going to be the 3 top 16, Texas? How about that? Which of those non-top 3 teams are most likely to get to the Sweet 16?
Well, that's a total crapshoot, right?
Yeah.
Just because the 2 seeds aren't, just because you're 25 doesn't mean you're going to be slotted with the relevant, whatever it is,
the corresponding top 16 seed,
exactly. Yeah. So that makes it really tough to tell. I thought Kansas was my big takeaway. I thought they looked really good. They've improved, right? I mean, they beat Baylor 4-1. They had just lost to them a few weeks ago, so I thought they acquitted themselves quite well against Oklahoma. So I would bet Kansas if there is one of these teams to make it through.
Yeah, they're going to be dangerous. I mean, again, you look for the future of this Big 12, pretty bright when you look at all these teams.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. What was the stat? 7 of the 10?
Yeah, 7 of the 10 into the tournament.
That's really solid. And obviously, I mean, we're talking about a conference that has the defending national champion, Oklahoma, who's top 2, Texas now top 3. And I just think that next tier is so solid, right? I mean, Oklahoma State a level above, but then you have Iowa State, Baylor, Kansas. That's what you need in your conference. You need those teams ranked in the 20s and the early 30s.
Match of the tournament for you. You have Oklahoma State over Texas Tech 4-3, proving my Texas Tech is frisky theory. But I would disagree. I would say Texas beating Oklahoma has to be the match of the tournament, just the significance to get over the hump in that third try, and just a reminder of the experience. I mean, again, I would just put match of the tournament as Peyton Stearns at the number one spot. All of the matches she played were the matches of the tournament. But I mean, again, that's a good win for Oklahoma State.
Yeah, well, I like to give myself rules, and I excluded all of the finals from match of the tournament because I knew we were going to do a big section on it.
Yeah.
But before we move on, speaking of your match of the tournament being Peyton Stearns, it is very likely that one or both of Peyton Stearns and Emma Navarro do not return next year. If we do not get a Peyton Stearns Emma Navarro matchup in Illinois, that is highway robbery. It is what we all deserve. We absolutely need to see that happen, whether it's in the team or the individual. We'd be remiss not to see that.
I have too much riding on the Connie Ma has to make an NCAA final take, so I'm fine if she wants to knock that out this year. Yeah, that'd be a hell of a. I mean, they're both playing exceptional tennis. I would be fine. Like, what if it's a Chloe Beck final? I mean, Chloe's been so good this year and so good throughout the course of the past 2 years.
It could be in the first round. I want to see the match, right? They've never played in college, and so that would be really unfortunate, given that they've been the two of the best players over the past of their 2 years.
I accept that as your answer. And by the way, Dendaloo, the Yankee, who's watching live, he agrees with us. Texas absolutely can win the NCAA tournament. Well, that's our biggest takeaway from the Big 12. Let's move on next to the SEC. And I think the chaos in this tournament happened outside of the headline, which is, of course, Texas A&M winning the SEC tournament title. A&M victories over Vanderbilt, Florida, and Georgia on their way to that SEC tournament victory. Of course, interesting to note, 4-2 victory over Vanderbilt, who is not the hottest team in the country entering the NCAA tournament, but oh my God, have they played better over the course of the past month compared to the first two, which were, I will say, disastrous. We can say it now because they got out of the jam, but boy, we would have been talking a lot about Vanderbilt being one of the most disappointing teams of the season. They have played much better down the year's home stretch. That's, again, A&M beats them 4-2, 4-3 over Florida, which I'm sure we'll talk about in consideration for match of the tournament. But then, A&M does what A&M does. 4-0 victory. Again, a shutout over Georgia in the final. Tatiana Makarova continues her winning ways. She's your tournament MVP, and she gets a victory over Viadmanova in the final. Her and JC Goldsmith, I believe, undefeated throughout the course of the tournament as well. We spent a lot of time talking about Texas A&M. I will say this. In doing my top 25 rankings for the Tennis Channel poll this week, in doing our top 16 for our Cracked Racquets rankings this week, I had no idea what to do with the number one spot in the rankings because North Carolina lost, Oklahoma lost. Texas has had a really good season, but they've lost twice to Oklahoma. I can't have them ranked above Oklahoma right now. I have A&M at number one in the country. And it's kind of by default, which is not the kindest thing to say to Coach Weaver and Aggie Nation. At the same time, this team has not lost since February. They have the longest win streak in the country, and they got pushed this weekend, whether it was against Vanderbilt, against Florida. I mean, they made it so that Georgia could not push them, although it's worth noting Georgia playing this weekend again without Leah Ma at the number one spot, which we can talk about momentarily. That said, I mean, epitomized in the final result. They take the doubles point. It's a win at one, and then Brandstein and Stoyana, two new contributors to this team, win at the number two doubles spot. Then it's Makarova, the senior, Goldsmith, the senior, and Stoyana, the freshman, getting the job done over Georgia in the final. Again, I know Townsend lost a match this weekend, and I think Gianna Pilette has struggled a bit relatively at the number 5 spot, and that she's winning in 3 sets as opposed to her teammates who are winning in straights. But Brandstein and Riasco go 3 sets. I have no issue with Carson and her level. I feel like she's going to be competitive at the number 1 spot. Again, I think this team has the best, if not top 2 doubles point in the country. They're number 1. They're not going to be the number 1 seed at the NCAA tournament, but they're the number 1, I think, anecdotally right now because they just haven't lost in months.
So are we doing your Texas A&M number 1 take now? Do we want to talk about the match? Where do I start?
You tell me, Jay. This is where the floor is yours.
So I think what you forgot to mention in the Texas A&M run to the SEC title is they actually didn't win a match at 5 or 6. They were 0-4 in their first 2 rounds, and they DNF'd after splitting sets in the final. I feel
without
worse.
Townsend, by the way. They pulled Katja
Well,
Townsend from
pulled
the
her
final.
because she lost.
Well, but it, again, you have to point that out, right? It was Jeanette Morales in the final because like that is a lineup question.
That's a lineup question for them. Absolutely. So I think it's really crazy to have Texas A&M at number one right now. Like really, really crazy. They don't have a single top 10 win on the season.
Yeah, it's
These
crazy.
other teams that we're talking about, North Carolina has 5. Oklahoma has 5. Duke has 5. Texas and Virginia have 3.
I would point out, though, that, they've beaten number 13 Georgia twice. They've beaten Auburn. They have beaten Florida twice. It's like if we go to top 16 wins, then they've got 5.
How many do you think UNC has? Right? How many do you think
Virginia? But I'm sure the gap is narrowed. Like it's not as severe when you do the top 16 framework versus top 10. And I think if you wanted to say top 8 wins, I think that's got to be the distinction.
All right, top 8 wins. It's still like 4-4. 2-2 and 0,
yeah,
right? I mean,
sure.
I don't have that,
right.
that data. You cannot make a team number 1 in the country when they haven't beat another elite team in the country. Yes, they play who is in front of them, but they also scheduled really poorly this year for us to be in this conversation, right? You look at a team like Ohio State who goes on the road against NC State, Duke, Georgia. That's what you need to do if you want to prove that you're the best team in the country, not play Prairie View. And so it's ridiculous to have Texas A&M at number 1 right now. I'll caveat, they might be the best team in the country. We just don't know. And so it's pretty wild to me to have them as number 1 right now.
It was almost by default. Again, I couldn't give it to UNC because they've lost twice in the past 2 weeks. I couldn't give it to Oklahoma coming off of a loss against Texas. It just didn't feel right. And I just didn't feel right giving it to Texas either, who, has the wins over Oklahoma and Oklahoma State and Cal twice. But, again, A&M has run the gauntlet through the SEC. It is so rare to get an undefeated champ. And when we do, it
happened last year.
Well, that's true.
Georgia was undefeated in the SEC last year.
Yeah,
this is actually a really good comp. Hold on. This is a really good comp. Georgia goes undefeated in the SEC regular season. They win the conference championship. They don't drop a point in the conference championship. How did they look at the national NCAA tournament?
But it's not
they really underperformed.
But it's not a direct comparison to me because when I saw Texas A&M at the national indoors from an eye test perspective, they belonged on the tier with the Oklahomas, with the UNCs. And I know they lose their first match to Cal 4-3. We're not relitigating that again. Don't worry. The point being, this team passed the eye test at the national indoors and they win their next 2 matches. And again, they played the national indoors, which Georgia did not during the 2021 season. I think their undefeated streak through the SEC is different than Georgia's was last year. I think there's more context to it. And I do think you're right. It's not a horrible comparison, but you think of the undefeated teams, right? The Vanderbilts of the world, the Floridas of the world, who when they go undefeated, they go on to national finals or national championship sorts of runs. You're right. Like right now, A&M, by the way, A&M
very different SEC.
And they're 6 in the rankings, which is a testament to the fact that they don't have the strongest resume of the bunch. Well, at the same time, they have if you ask this team, well, tell me about your losses this year, they'd say, you mean our loss? Like this team has found answers whenever they've needed it throughout the course of the season.
Yeah. So is Oklahoma's 2 losses to UNC in the national indoors final and to Texas worse than A&M's 1 loss to Cal?
No, it's pretty similar. They're 3rd for the record. And by the way, the problem is on the poll, I can't say tied for 1st, right? Like that's a cop-out. I think I would have done that. I would just have a multi-way tie for 1st right now and say no one's in 1st. Or we'd vacate the number 1 spot and we just move everyone down because I don't think there is a clear-cut number 1. You can't do that when you submit your poll.
I think it is very true. I think there is a very valid case for many teams to be number 1. Texas A&M is not on that list for me. But I don't want to.
That's where this is good. This is where, again, this ain't good. Continue to doubt us. It's played well for us A&M faithful. Yeah, all year long. I mean, now I think I'm steering the bandwagon with all the cheerleading I've done for this A&M team. I do think there's a point to be made, though, to what you're saying. This is not the strongest SEC year. I do think the conference is pretty deep, but it's the strength up top. Like, again, A&M's your one top 10 team. And I'm curious if you think this weekend's results, as we look beyond A&M, prove that. And I mean, for Georgia to earn the victories they did this weekend, and to get to that final, you look at what Georgia was able to do. They knock off Tennessee 4-3 in the semifinals. Tennessee, who earned a fantastic 4-2 win over Auburn in the quarterfinals. Georgia also the 4-2 win over South Carolina. Obviously, South Carolina's played some really good tennis down the season's home stretch. For Georgia to do all of that without Leah Ma, like, again, it is a bit of an indictment on the conference.
Your words.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was an impressive performance of Georgia to do that without Leah Ma.
Yeah,
right?
That's probably their most impressive streak of the season.
Yeah, and Vidmanova is still clearly struggling from her injury. She doesn't seem to be moving as well as she was earlier in the season. She was as dominant. So yeah, I mean, this Georgia team is talented, but again, what we've talked about is it's tough to rely on two freshmen, right, as like the core of this lineup. And when you're not getting points on the board from your fifth years or your seniors, it's going to be tough come postseason.
Allison Ojeda is a close friend of this Cracked Racquets program. And I always feel like saying that before I say something like this. Tennessee is the team I want to see the least as my number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. They just have options everywhere. Yeah. They are such a deep team, and you could argue the discrepancy between number 1 and 6 singles in terms of quality is as small as you're going to see on any team in the country. But they have 6 players who you could just say, you're going to play here today. You're going to play here today. We're going to put you there. We're going to do this here. And like, they can find 3 singles victories in every match. Now, I believe they've only lost 1 match this season when they've won the doubles point. That was at home against Vanderbilt a couple of weeks ago. If they get doubles points, just their depth is extraordinary. And again, for them to get a 4-2 victory over an Auburn team, that's the sort of top 16 victory this team has been chasing all year long. They finally get it. They follow up and play Georgia extraordinarily close as well. That's one of my 3 biggest non-finals takeaways from the tournament, is that I do think at Tennessee is my most dangerous number 2 seed because they're not going to be top 16. Talk to me about what you saw.
Yeah, that win over Auburn was my match of the tournament. Yeah. I thought that was super impressive. They had just lost to Auburn a few weeks ago, 6-1. Yep. This Tennessee team we thought would kind of have the season Auburn had, right? When you talk about that, minimal drop-offs between 1 all the way down to 6. And this just had the charisma of a college tennis match, right? It was a Friday night under the lights. Mertena came back deep down in the tiebreak in the second, come back and win that in the third set. This was a really good victory for this Tennessee team that should give them a lot of confidence moving into NCAAs.
Yeah, all the pieces, Tomase, Kutzer, Sheena, again, when they haven't had a match where all 6 of them played well, it felt like, until this NCAA tournament. And again, to have them clicking on all cylinders, you saw the passion on the video tweeted out after the match of them celebrating in the locker room, and there was no letdown. I mean, again, the next day they play a 4-3 match against Georgia. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. Where are you with Florida entering the NCAA tournament? Because to me, they're one of the biggest unknowns of the postseason.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, I think they definitely deserve their top 16 seed, right? They played A&M super close, and that came down to a tiebreak in dubs, and they took 3 singles off of Texas A&M. So this is a team that I would say is a very dangerous number 2 seed, or top 16 seed, that's going to be, I think they looked good in the SEC tournament. Obviously, it helps it was played at home. But I thought I was impressed with how close they played A&M, something that a lot of these teams didn't do throughout the regular season.
Yeah, I would also say 4-1 win over Arkansas is pretty impressive result for them in the quarterfinals. I mean, again, when you look at this SEC conference, I do have to give a shout out to Kentucky, who goes winless during the regular season. They get a massive victory over LSU, who is ready to put this 2022 season to bed. No doubt about that. But again, you look at this SEC conference, they have, I believe, in the end, 9 of their 14 teams into the tournament. Ole Miss right now, 46, but they're probably going to be just on the outside. I mean, again, I do think the SEC is very deep. Like, I think Tennessee, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Alabama. I would probably leave Alabama out of that list, no disrespect. They're all teams capable of pulling off an upset, depending on where they go. I think all of those teams can get to the second round of the NCAA tournament, but I do think this is a conference that could produce, let's say they get 4 top 16 seeds. Not going to shock me if one of Tennessee, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, or Arkansas pulls off an upset on the road.
Yeah, I would be surprised.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, Tennessee, I just have this feeling like that team, I've yet to see them peak in a match. And I think they finally started to peak this weekend. And that's why they're particularly dangerous.
I would say a lot of these teams have momentum, right? It feels like of all these conferences, like there are a lot of SEC teams where the narrative.
Even Florida.
Yeah.
Florida can make that argument now too, finally.
Exactly. There's a good narrative for Tennessee, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Auburn. There's a lot of teams coming in here feeling like they've righted the ship after potentially a not as good start to the season. So, maybe it wouldn't surprise me if they were to make the round of 16 as a number 2 seed.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, match of the tournament, Tennessee over Auburn 4-3. I would agree with you there. Again, there were a lot of good ones in this SEC event. All right, with that said, let's move to the West Coast. And this was one we circled as perhaps the biggest question mark. What was going to happen? Because Stanford, USC, UCLA, all floating right around that number 16 mark in the ITA rankings. Of course, the team that was the hottest coming into the Pac-12 tournament was Arizona State, who continued their freaking winning ways over the course of the action at the Ojai. And ultimately, Arizona State knocks off USC 4-3 in the quarterfinals, knocks off Cal 4-3 in the semifinals. Their run finally ended in the finals by the Stanford Cardinal, who win their 4th Pac-12 tournament title in the past 5 seasons. Stanford 4-1 win, impressive over UCLA in the semifinals. They then close out that 4-2 victory in the final over Arizona State. Again, all due respect to Stanford, another week, I still don't know what to make of this freaking Pac-12. Like, I honestly feel better about Arizona State than I think I do any other team in the conference. Like, that team is just freaking good.
Yeah, and that was a very close final. Stanford fought off 4 match points in doubles.
And they played 4-3 matches the 2 days before.
Yeah, and then they came out and took 4 first sets against Stanford. So it felt like maybe Stanford had a little bit more on the gas after having more straightforward matches. This Arizona State, talk about a tough number 2 seed. Kind of is a bummer. They're going to fall probably just outside the top 16. That's a team no one wants to see in their draw. But overall, I think the Stanford and Arizona State, you probably have to feel best about. I thought that was a really good win for Stanford over UCLA, and I thought it was a gritty performance in the final.
Arizona State 4-3 loss to Auburn on the kickoff weekend, 4-3 losses at Oregon, at Washington. That was, or 4-3 loss at home against Washington. They got knocked off on the LA swing by USC, and UCLA lost to Oklahoma State earlier this season as well. But 16-7 overall in the year. They went 11-1 at home throughout the course of this season. And again, you look at the different pieces, whether it's Patricia Spacco's 14-1 overall in the year. You feel so good about her at the bottom of the lineup. She's 6-1 in her last 10. Sedona Gallagher, 10-3 at the number 3 spot. She's 7-2 in her last 10. I mean, just again, whether it's Jankowski as well, who's 8-2 in her last 10, 13-3 overall on the season. She's lost her last 2, but this team can play. Like, they've got a ton of options, 32-13 in doubles on the season as well. They fight. They're a lot of grinders. Like, again, you're going to get your court time in when you're playing Arizona State. I know Stanford won the tournament, but I actually think the rise of this Arizona State team is the biggest storyline of the Pac-12 down its, home stretch of this 2022 season. That said, you look for this Stanford team, who, again, it's a really nice victory over an on-fire Arizona State team 4-2. And it's a match where, as you mentioned, Stanford takes the doubles point, but drops 4 first sets and yet still manages to find victories. And, again, Angelica Blake is playing some really good tennis right now.
Yeah.
She wins 0-0 over Gallagher. We've talked about the struggles of Connie Ma. Well, Connie Ma, 3-4 win at the number 1 spot over Morley, who hasn't had the best season for Arizona State, but still, Connie Ma struggled down the season home stretch. She gets a straight set win. And then Yepifanova's done it all year long for this team, and she gets ultimately a fitting clinch at that number 2 single spot after dropping a first set 7-6. She takes it 6-7, 6-2, 6-2. You're the Stanford expert. I mean, again, Sarah Choi lost the match at number 6 singles in this battle, but where the Cardinal right now, as I mentioned, 15th in the ITA projected rankings. They are the conference tournament champion. They probably hold on to a top 16 seed in the end. I mean, it feels like we're back in the mid 2010s, early teens seeded Stanford team going into the NCAA tournament. We've seen that recipe do damage. The Cardinals do damage with that recipe before. Where are you with this team?
Yeah, this team is not those teams.
Okay.
A very different sentiment for those teams when they were underranked, just being like, that's ridiculous. They are clearly a top 5 team. I don't think that's the sense with this team. I think that one of the big components here is Connie Ma, right? She snapped her 4-match losing streak. She's back, maybe. She had a good conference tournament. She didn't lose. She was about to lose to Abby Forbes, but that's fine. So that's a key component for them. I think the big question is going to be at the bottom of the lineup. Obviously, Connie Ma, if she's playing well, Yepifanoova Blake, how she's playing, those 3 can hang. Questions is just at the bottom of the lineup. They've been dicey in doubles. So this was a great performance from them, particularly against UCLA as well. And look, you can never underestimate Stanford, right? Underestimate them at your own peril. But I don't think that they have the depth required to really go all the way this year.
I mean, you look for this Stanford team, 17-5 overall on the season, a 4-3 loss to Virginia, 4-3 loss to UCSB, 4-1 loss at Pepperdine, 4-2 at Arizona State. That's a loss that's appreciated with time. 5-2 at Cal. Not the worst superficial set of results for this Stanford team. Of course, you look at the stats and what this team's been able to accomplish throughout the course of the season. Ma's 14-5 overall in the year. It's pretty solid. For the freshman, Yepifanoova 19-3, Blake 18-4. You feel pretty good about this top 3 against anyone. Again, superficially, Valencia Shu's 16-2, Sarah Choi's 18-4. Like, again, this team's got options everywhere in singles, and you go back to the kickoff weekend where they're a heartbeat away from knocking off Virginia. Maybe this Stanford team's way better positioned if they do make the national indoor. Certainly they would be, just because they'd have had 3 more high-level matches on their schedule. Again, I don't feel bad about USC, a 4-3 loss to Arizona State. I still think they're playing much better tennis down the season's home stretch. I know UCLA lost 4-1 to Stanford, but I thought that had more to do with Stanford than the Bruins. I do think I have no, maybe it turns out the Pac-12 is exceptional and like all 4 of these teams go on runs, or maybe it turns out they've all been beaten up on each other because there is no elite team out west this season. I come out of this Pac-12 tournament. That's one of my 3, probably my biggest of the non-finals takeaways, but like Cal right now, you look for where they're at in the rankings. And I want to transition obviously to you here. Cal's now down to number 11 in the projected rankings. And again, Stanford 16, Arizona State 17, UCLA 18, USC 19. Pac-12 is probably not going to get a top 8 seed. Pepperdine right now is projected ranking at 8 as well. It's going to be a photo finish for all those teams out west.
Yeah, I mean, the big question is which of those teams get sent to Pepperdine as a number 2 seed. One of them is going to go. So, yeah, I mean, look, my hunch tells me it's probably more the former of, are they really good and just isolated? We haven't seen that much of them. We kind of saw that last year, right? The USC women went on the road. They knocked off Florida. It would not surprise me to see one of these teams as a number 2 seed knock off a number 1 seed. And it wouldn't surprise me if Stanford knocks off a top 3 opponent in that first round. But I mean, look, Stanford still has a lot of maturing to do, I think, in a lot of their positions. And I just really worry about that depth. I think one of the biggest differences between some of those past teams that we talk about is their low ranking was explainable. It was almost always because they didn't play indoors or they had serious injuries earlier in the season. That's not the case this year. They've played a full schedule. Yes, they lost to Virginia in the kickoff, but they didn't make indoors. So we'll have to see. But again, that crop of teams, all super dangerous coming into NCAAs.
Yeah, very true. And by the way, I meant to get to this comment earlier, but I want to give a shout out to QH, who just gets the show. He goes Texas A&M, or she goes Texas A&M beat Florida. Florida crushed FSU twice. FSU beat Duke. Duke won the ACC. QH, you just get me. That's the transitive property in a nutshell. That's the sort of content I'm looking for. Yeah, it speaks to the wide open nature. I love the transitive property as much as anyone. Not a lot of transitive properties work in the way of the Pac-12, though. Again, other than Cal.
I mean, Cal beats Texas A&M. Arizona State beats Cal. Stanford beats Cal. Ergo, Stanford
also beat Arizona State. Yeah, I see the logic here. But Arizona State also beat Stanford. And so, and Stanford lost to USC, who lost to Loyola, and also lost to UCSB. So maybe those are the two best teams out west.
There you go.
Again, QH, you get the show. That's why we're here on the deciding point. All right, with all that said, let's move on to our final of the Power 5 conferences. And I'll be honest, the juiciest of the bunch. We saved a nice gem here for 50 minutes in. ACC streak snapped for the North Carolina Tar Heels. It's Duke who is riding a hot streak heading into the month of May. And obviously the Blue Devils earned a massive end of season victory over North Carolina in Durham. But you look at what Duke was able to accomplish over the course of the past week as well. 4-2 win over Wake Forest in the quarterfinals, 4-3 win over Miami in the semifinals, 4-1 victory over UVA in the final. Of course, for UVA, who knocks off North Carolina 4-2 in the semifinals. No one beats the Cavaliers 3 times in 2022. At the same time, Virginia 4-2 victory over NC State in the quarterfinals as well. We'll start. I'm going to force us to start with the finals here. Again, we'll stick with the outline. What's your takeaway from this Duke team, who unequivocally, I'm blaming you. We crossed off because of you. We're uncrossing. We're doing it.
I have no qualms about that. But look, we talk about hottest teams in the country. Duke is, in my
every definition of it.
In my opinion, number one on that list, right? Since that horrible Florida swing, they've been undefeated. They've knocked off North Carolina State. They've knocked off UVA. They've knocked off UNC, right? They are absolutely riding a high, knock off Miami. So they've won 8 of their last matches, and they looked really good this tournament, and they won in all different places, right? I thought one of the revelations was Ellie Coleman. I thought played really well this tournament. I think Chloe Beck and Georgia Drummy, that flip has paid off for them. Emma Jackson coming through at number 3. Kelly Chen saved them in that Miami match. She had a Herculean effort there. So they've got answers at all of the positions, and they're starting to fire on all cylinders. And we said, right, they had that returning top 4 in, Beck, Drummy, Chen, and they needed to find a few others to click, and Jackson and Coleman are both starting to click.
Yeah, no, they dropped doubles against Wake Forest, and Wake Forest very good at doubles, but it's the way they won that match. Straight set victories from Beck, Drummy, Chen, and then on this occasion it was Emma Jackson, the freshman, delivering at the number 3 spot for the 4-1 win against Miami. They take the doubles point. And then again, I love Chloe Beck suffers her first loss of the season to Eden Richardson, but everyone else
who beats Navarro and Beck and loses to everybody else.
Yeah, apparently. Exactly. That's just what Eden does. But, Drummy steps up, 3-set win for her, and Kelly Chen is finally starting to play some really good tennis. She clinched against North Carolina. She gets the 7-6 in the third clinch for her team against Miami. And then again, on this day, it wasn't Jackson, it was Ellie Coleman, that freshman, getting the job done at the number 6 spot. And then against Virginia, it just kind of all came together. And again, Chloe Beck may have lost the match to Emma Navarro, but Drummy, fantastic win over a very much informed Natasha Subash. Coleman continues her winning ways, freshman straight set win over Zia Dato, and then Emma Jackson with the clinch. 7-6 in the third. And of course, Billiken, who's been up and down in singles over the past 2 seasons, a lot of DNFs or 3-set matches for her, which again, it's not as valuable as a win, but there is, maybe not on the scoreboard, we'll call it a quarter of a point value in just staying alive and not allowing my, Virginia, to put an easy point on the board, or, a point they were probably counting on from Heba Sheikh. This Duke team is clicking. And it does feel like, again, at Chloe, it doesn't matter whether it's Beck or Drummy, you feel good about them at the number 2 singles position every time they play. You feel like one of their freshmen is probably going to get the job done on any given day. Now, whether it's Jackson or Coleman, it depends. But you'd like probably them to split those 2 freshmen, go 1-1 in those 2 results. If my bet is, well, we need Kelly Chen to have a big May, go back to last year. Go back to 2019. Kelly Chen has big Mays.
Yep.
This Duke team, sorry, again, I caught myself. I was going to swear. This Duke team is dangerous. They just are.
Yeah, no, they're super dangerous. I mean, they've beaten all the teams that they needed to beat.
I guess I should say they're tier 1. They're national title contenders. They have elevated themselves. They're 19-3 on the year, and like one horrible weekend in Florida and a loss to Oklahoma. Like, They're excellent.
Yeah, I totally agree. And they're playing their best tennis when they need to, right? You talk about Kelly Chen. Yeah, if your match is going to come down to number 4 singles and you have Kelly Chen there, you feel really good about your chances. I don't know if she's playing her best tennis, but she's still finding ways to win, which is all that really matters. So yeah, I was really impressed with this Duke team. This was a really close match with Virginia. That 4-1 score does not do it justice. Doubles came down to a tiebreak. But yeah, very impressed with this Duke team. Absolutely in that tier 1 conversation.
Well, let's flip this script and talk about this Virginia team now, who beats North Carolina, who beats North Carolina State. 20-5 overall on the year are the Cavaliers. They've lost twice to UNC, who they get the revenge third win over. And again, my impossible to beat a team thrice theory continues to pay dividends. They've lost twice to Duke. Ours? Okay. It's not yours. I'm not. I will happily. I will co-sign it with you. Like, okay. I have no issues there. Co-authors. Okay. You know what? That's going into the intro. Co-authors of the thrice lost theory. Is that fair? Can I?
I would like to trademark thrice.
Okay.
Thrice
You're right.
is
You're right. Thrice is a J edition. You helped me with the nomenclature. There's no denying that. But 2 losses for Virginia against North Carolina. 2 losses for Virginia against Duke. 1 loss, 4-3 against Miami, which I don't think is a bad loss at all, considering that match.
No, that was a bad loss. It was 6-1.
Oh, 6-1. Did I say 4-3? You're right. It was 6-1. It was the 4-3 match they lost to Duke in the regular season. Not a bad loss at all.
Yeah, and that was without Travinsky.
Yeah, exactly. Still, you look at what this Virginia team was able to do this weekend. I mean, for them to beat NC State in the fashion they did, where they take they drop the doubles point, but they take, what was it? I believe 4 of the 5 3-set matches go the way of Virginia. Yeah, Navarro in 3 sets at 1, Chervinsky a 3-set win over Negroho at 3, Heba Sheikh 6-0 in the third at 5, Ziodato 6-2 in the third at Abrams. I mean, that's a good old-fashioned backyard brawl, and it goes the way of the Cavaliers. And then for them the next day to take the doubles point against North Carolina. And again, Ziodato, straight set win over Yarlagadda. Subash this time, 3-set win over Scotty. And then Navarro doing her thing over Cam Mora. This is a really good, even Chervinsky preventing Riley Tran from getting on the board with a victory. You take it away. Thoughts on the Who's?
Yeah, it was an unequivocal weekend of success for them, right? To beat NC State, to beat North Carolina, 2 of the top 3 teams in the country coming into this tournament. This was the first time they had beaten North Carolina since the 2016 NCAA. So that was a huge monkey off of their back. Not to mention that both of their coaching staff in Coach O'Leary, they are former UNC players, former All-Americans there. So this was a great win for them. And this is a team that's elevated themselves absolutely, to me, in the tier 1 conversation, right? I think you look what they've done. The big revelation for me has been Sarah Ziodato at number 6. She had struggled early in the season. They had really struggled with their bottom half of the lineup. But, Heba Sheikh has been solid. Ziodato's playing some really good tennis right now. And if they can find a point, if they can find a point and a half at the bottom of the lineup, you're getting Navarro at 1. You're probably feel really good about splitting 2 and 3. I mean, this was a great win for them, a great victory for them, and a great weekend.
And you look for Virginia now in the projected rankings, they're all the way up to number 4.
Yeah.
And again, Virginia's 4, Duke 5, NC State 7, North Carolina still up at number 1. It's the ACC's world, and we're all living in it once again this season. Let's round out this ACC conversation. We have to talk about NC State. And our guy, Dendalou the Yankee, asked what happened to the Wolfpack. And I do think surface level, Wolfpack are 4-4 over their last 8 matches. But again, let's answer those losses in a vacuum. 4-3 lost to North Carolina. 4-3 lost to Duke. 4-3 lost at Virginia. 4-2 lost to Virginia in the conference tournament. I refuse to take them down from tier 1 because, again, against Virginia, they lose 4 of 5 3-set matches. Yeah, it didn't break their way the way everything seemed to break their way through the first 2 months. But I had a conversation with the Karma Gods, and now this NC State team is 500, and now it's fair game. It's like, all right, you have reset your chi. You're back to neutral entering the NCAA tournament. They still won the doubles point. And by virtue of winning in that doubles point, it's just really hard to find 4 singles victories. Again, it took 4 3-set victories for Virginia to beat them. Now, again, you only got to get beaten once to get knocked out of the NCAA tournament. But I still think this team is just too solid of an out. And I think I think quarterfinals is the floor. And once you're in the quarterfinals, it's anyone's ball game.
Yeah. Floor feels pretty bold.
No, that's how confident I still feel in them because, again, they're going to win doubles. And it takes a Virginia-esque, and Virginia's number 4 in the freaking projected rankings, singles performance to beat them. And I just there's 7 teams capable of doing that. Thus, they're a quarterfinalist.
Yeah, I mean, and that could be very true. But floor still feels aggressive to me. I mean, look, you're meant those are all top 5 teams that they've lost to now. So they've lost 4 for 4-4, but I mean, they're out of the tier 1 conversation for me. I think it's tough to see them replicating the wins back to back to back. I think there are some holes towards the bottom of the lineup. I think you probably don't favor them at number 1 against any of these top teams, which I think is challenging. So I think it's going to be tough. I do think they have excellent doubles that will probably save them and get them a win, right? Maybe it's that round of 16 win. I don't think that wins you a championship.
As of right now, NC State, again, number 7 in the projected rankings. They would take on Ohio State. Boy, would that be a fun rematch of a 4-3 match we saw. And again, it would be a 4-3 match NC State won at home earlier this season. I could 1,000% see things playing out that way for the Wolfpack. But again, really fun ACC tournament weekend of results. Your match of the tournament is Miami's 4-3 victory over Georgia Tech, which came in the quarterfinals. Make the case.
Well, I won't hear anything differently. I mean, this was an awesome match. It was similar to what I mentioned earlier, just true charisma of a college tennis match. It was a late night match. Miami drops dubs. They storm back. I mean, came down to, freshman Tatiana Nikolenka. She saved 6 match points throughout the entirety of that match. She wins 5-7, 7-6, 7-6. I mean, what's not to love about that victory? Should note that Miami is without Diana Coden right now, who has played that 5-6 match. So Nikolenka had only played 7 matches throughout the course of this year. She was a January admit. So just it's what college tennis is all about. And that was a fantastic match.
Yeah, no, well said. I would disagree and just go with it has to be NC State, Virginia. Are you kidding? 5 3-set matches in singles. And yeah, they all happened to break Virginia's way. That was an exceptional match. I know it was 4-2 in scoreline, but to me, that was the match of the tournament. We haven't talked about the Tar Heels. Quite frankly, I don't know what to make of this performance. Again, for them to lose in the fashion that they did to Virginia, to drop the doubles point the way that they did, to see Navarro beat Mora the way that she did. Yarla got a shaky performance at 6. I still think she's earned the benefit of the doubts, but if you're going back to early in the season, this was something you talked about, so I got to give you credit of how confident are you in Yarla at the biggest moments. I mean, Scotty loses in 3 sets to Subash. Like, that's just an excellent match. It was always going to be an excellent match. Tan Gillig, another straight set win at 5. I think Tran, Crawley, Tan Gillig, you still feel good about as your nucleus going into every match, but there's a lot of pressure on all 3 of them to earn victories, it feels like, all the time. Can North Carolina get back to their splitting ways at the top 2 single spots? I think that's a big question. Again, doubles pairing wise, they've quietly played around with a lot of different things all season, and I still don't know that they have their biggest rhythm. Again, when this team takes a doubles point, you're not beating them. Like, it's just not going to happen. But they haven't in their 2 losses. And again, first time since 2015, this team hasn't won the ACC Conference Championship. I said it last week. I'm still sticking with this theory. Like, okay, now they've lost. Now we have 2 weeks to get our shit together. Sorry, Westhoff. I knew it was coming to get our stuff together. What is this team? Again, they have to be tier 1. They have to be. But where's your Carolina confidence?
Well, they're definitely still tier 1, right? In some ways, this could be a huge blessing, right? I mean, they're not undefeated going into NCAAs. They didn't win the ACC championship. Like, not carrying that burden that so many of these past North Carolina teams have had. So, in some ways, you can imagine them playing more freely in the NCAAs, feeling like they actually have something to prove rather than something to lose. And it really just depends on how they show up at the NCAAs. It could also be really deflating for the team. It's tough to be the team that snaps a streak, right? No ACC tournament titles, 2015. That's tough. Look, I think you're right. That 3, 4, and 5, really tough to see people knocking off that. But if you're not getting the results up top or in doubles, then the pressure is on them. And yeah, on any given day, one of these teams can get a victory at 3, 4, and 5. So they're now, to me, just in this mix of these kind of like top 5, 6-ish teams rather than being a step above.
Yeah, I mean, again, when they go 2-1 in the doubles and 1 and 2 singles points, they're killing opponents. Of course, it's really hard to go 2-1 in those points at the NCAA tournament, and too frequently they've gone 0-3 or 1-2 in those 3 points. And again, it's a lot of it's the flip of a coin. We saw when Scotty's locked in, as she was at the National Indoors, this team will and can beat anyone in the country. But you're right. They don't carry the burden of being an unequivocal number 1 entering the NCAA tournament. It's part of the madness, and they, like everyone else, are going to look to prove themselves over the course of the next month. With that said, again, Miami semifinalists, that's a nice reminder how good they are. Any other thoughts on this ACC?
No, I mean, yeah, Miami played Duke super close. They're still really dangerous. I think lastly, I mean, the big question, you mentioned the top 4 seeds, top 8 seeds, 4 of them are going to be from the ACC. I think we'll learn a lot in the NCAAs about how good this ACC is relative to the other conferences. That's probably my biggest question.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, last year it was legit. It wouldn't shock me at all if it's legit this season as well. With that in mind, let's move to the best of the rest, as there were some other results that happened throughout the course of the season. Of course, shout out to those conference champions. Actually, sorry, super producer Daniel Westhoff, you're going to get mad at me. Can you pull up that graphic one more time? Show us our conference champions. Just want to list, again, who our winners were over the course of this Power 5 play. Again, a huge shout out to our SEC conference champ, Texas A&M, our Big 12 conference champ, Texas, Pac-12 conference champion, Stanford, and, of course, ACC conference champion, Duke. Each of those teams cementing their status either top 8, top 16, but entering postseason play, certainly all of them as much momentum on their backs as anyone. But with that in mind, let's move over to the best of the rest. And those of you tuning in live may have seen, we got to start with the Big Ten conference tournament coming up this weekend. Women are in Iowa City. Ohio State going to be your number 1 seed as they win the Big Ten outright, complete an undefeated season, 5-2 over Maryland, 4-0 over Rutgers. Luna Dorme back in the lineup, looking healthy. I also like the Buckeyes doubles pairings. I like the shifts they made. Marzal and Contos, I think 7-1 now overall. You know, in the big matches, Boulay and Allen are going to bring their best at 1. Now, what exactly they're going to do at 3, I still think that's a question. But they're undefeated going into the Big Ten Conference tournament. Michigan going to be your number 2 seed, and that was the best weekend of the season for the Wolverines. 4-1 over Illinois, 4-1 over Northwestern as well. Where are you as we approach this Big Ten Conference tournament with this Big Ten Conference?
Yeah, I mean, this was, what we expected with Ohio State, right? To kind of round out their undefeated regular season. I think what was impressive about Michigan is they won a Dubs point against Northwestern.
Yeah, we did.
It was a close one too. So I'm
they
sure
dumped the Gatorade on Ronnie, not for the 300th win, but because they won a doubles point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I thought these were both good wins for Michigan, Illinois, Northwestern, kind of two of the teams that have been scratching at the top 2, Ohio State and Michigan. But this really comes down to Michigan, Ohio State, and that's we didn't really learn anything else in the regular season.
Well said. All right, let's move on. Unranked USF, stunning. Brian Kanyeko and the UCF Knights in the AAC Championship quarterfinals. Ultimately, it was Memphis winning the title. And it was quietly a very solid season for Memphis, who knocks off Tulsa 4-1 to secure an NCAA berth that they may otherwise have not had. Now, you look at this AAC conference, I do think it's interesting. UCF, the only team guaranteed entry into the tournament on their ranking. Now, Memphis is going to get in 20-6 overall as the conference winners, but SMU, who's been scrappy all year long, they're 46 in the projected rankings. Tulsa, would they have loved this victory? They're currently 47 in the projected rankings. Again, USF is 7-16 overall, so even though they get the massive boost from beating UCF, they never really had a shot. SMU deserves to be in the tournament. I don't know whose spot I'm taking away. That would be a tough exclusion with the resume they've put together this year. But, I mean, your thoughts on the AAC Conference Championship?
Well, just to spend a minute on that, USF victory over UCF. I mean, that was incredible. I mean, they played in their regular season finale and UCF won 4-0, and it wasn't even close. And USF gets a victory here after losing the Dubs point. They took 4 singles victories against UCF. So, I mean, just an incredible performance for them. You're right. Their only chance of making the NCAA tournament was winning the tournament. So, but still a good result for them, an incredible result. And I mean, tough this conference. It's just like everyone is just outside of the top, 44 being the cutoff. So Memphis obviously comes away with the berth that they need. So looking forward to seeing how UCF rebounds in NCAAs.
Yeah, again, UCF still has a lot of pieces. They're still going to be they're going to be a number 2 seed now. And so again, that's a tough team that's proven they can earn some big victories as throughout the course of this 2022 season. Again, beyond the AAC, Old Dominion, second straight Conference USA final and title. They knock off Charlotte 4-3 in the final. Now, good year for both the Charlotte men's and women's teams, who both make the conference tournament finals, have both been flirting with top 50 status all year long. But don't forget about Coach Manila and ODU. Like, again, this was a team that was as hot as any team through the first 2 months of the season. They still got startup Seva at the top of the lineup. She's had a fantastic season as the senior. I mean, ODU, second straight Conference USA title.
And last, since they're moving conferences.
Very well said. I agree. Any other thoughts on Conference USA? I mean, again, you look at this conference overall, Old Dominion getting in, FIU getting in, Charlotte probably going to just miss out, as is Rice. Still, I think pretty good year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just tough for Charlotte to lose this 4-3. That would have been their guaranteed berth, and ODU probably would have got in on their ranking.
Yeah, no, yes, well said. All right, final one, and we've been on this all year long. The Princeton beat. They claim the Ivy League title outright, getting the victories they need. Now, they're probably going to be a 4 seed wherever it is they go. And you look for this Princeton team overall on the year. They end the season 11-10, number 42 in the projected ranking. They will be the only Ivy League representative, which remains shocking to me. That again, there was so much momentum for the Ivy League before the pandemic. And it's just like the fact that they had 2 years of no tennis. What a death sentence, or at least not a death sentence, but what a coma it put the conference in from a momentum building standpoint. That said, I mean, hell hath no fury like this healthy Princeton roster. If they're your number 4 seed, you are dropping an F-bomb.
Yeah, they might squeak in a 3 seed now that they're up to like 42. But yeah, I mean, I made this call before. I think they're headed to Virginia. I don't know kind of what other place makes sense. That's brutal. This is a team you want no part of, because they feel like they have a lot to prove.
Can we flush this out, unpack it for a bit? Because I know I just kind of said something there and you were shaking your head, but for those podcast listeners who are watching this or hearing this the next day, we agree the Ivy League had all the momentum in the world, right? At the start of the 2020 season, what was it? 5 of the men's teams were in the top 25 or top 20, something crazy like that. And I think, teams like Dartmouth and Columbia and Yale and Penn on the women's side, Harvard had all start to build momentum alongside of Princeton. It does feel like that momentum's been zapped.
Oh yeah, I wasn't shaking my head in disagreement.
I know, but I just want to give you the chance to speak on it.
Yeah, I was absolutely agreeing. I mean, I think one of the hardest parts here is you can only stay for 4 years within the Ivy League. So you look at all these other schools, all these players playing for fifth years. Not only did the Ivy League have 2 seasons missing, the players can't stay. So, you're really starting from scratch at a lot of these programs. If you had juniors or seniors come 2020, you're starting from scratch, and it's tough to build a program and talk to recruits when you're not playing. Can't come to matches. So yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit of a long road back for a few of these programs as they essentially rebuild. But this felt like the ascension of the Ivy League in the late 2010s. And, maybe we'll start to see that in a few years again.
Yeah. I mean, again, look at the tennis recruiting rankings. The Ivy Leagues continue to bring in recruits. And so it's just a matter of giving these recruits now time to settle. And to your point, they haven't had that time over the past few seasons. All right. With all of that said, that's your past week of conference action. Of course, we still have a bit of play to go before we get to the start of the 2022 NCAA tournament. But before we get there, let's talk about our rankings and what they look like after last week's action. And again, movement at the top of our Cracked Racquets college tennis poll. Jay docking North Carolina. I'm not going to say down to what position, but lower than I had them. Thus, Oklahoma takes over at the number 1 spot. North Carolina at number 2. Texas A&M at number 3. We then go Duke 4, Texas 5, Virginia 6, NC State 7. I think that's a pretty firm top 7. I want to stop there because I think the real debate comes at number 8, but I think all 7 of those teams both deserve to be top 7 teams, are probably all in my tier 1 of teams entering the NCAA tournament. And I think that's a good line of demarcation of where tier 1 ends.
I agree with that. That is definitely the top 7. And with this hanging chat of Pepperdine, but yeah, that's definitely where, when we're ranking these teams, that is the top 7. That's clear.
I agree. I think, again, firm cutoff line there based on resumes,
Agreed.
eye test, etc. After that, Oklahoma State 8, Pepperdine 9. I'd actually stop things, I think, there as well and be like, okay, these are my 2 hanging chads where I'm not, out to use your term, I'm not exactly sure what to make of these 2 teams. What lineup are we going to see from Oklahoma State on any given day? What the hell are we going to see from Pepperdine on any given day? This is the what the hell category.
Well, there's a few other teams in here that would fit that category, but
so do Georgia and Cal belong in the what the hell category as well? Should we expand tier 2?
They belong in a different what the hell category. Well, actually, I don't think Georgia does, right? I think we kind of know what we're getting.
I agree. I think we know. Yeah.
Cal definitely is in that category.
Yeah.
So I would probably draw it there. But that what the hell category is not necessarily tied to rankings. There are a lot of teams.
Exactly. That's its own sort of tier.
It's its own tier.
Tier 2, I probably stop. I mean, you'll say after Miami. I'd say after Ohio State, maybe. I don't know. I guess that I'd stop tier 2 after Ohio State, and then Miami through probably LMUs of the world to the 22 spot is tier 3. Give me your line. And again, right now, 8 is Oklahoma State, 9 Pepperdine, 10 Georgia, 11 Cal, 12 Ohio State is where I stop tier 2. We have 13 Miami, 14 Auburn, 15 Stanford, 16 Florida. Your final thoughts on our top 16 rankings?
Yeah, I mean, I think Stanford is an asterisk, right? I do think that they
Sure.
probably belong in this tier two conversation, even though they're ranked 15, right? Who do I think is more likely to win the NCAA title? Auburn and Miami or Stanford? I'll say Stanford. So, I think they probably get bumped up. But overall, I think these make sense. And then I would say, like, there's that next tier when you look at the top 25. I mean, 16 through 25 is all really close.
It's one of those first times I've looked at the rankings this season and thought, okay, this makes sense. Like we have finally reached the point where we have enough data. Yeah, regular season about to be complete. So there's your top 16 for the week. And again, look out for tomorrow. We're going to unveil our men's and women's top 16s in a graphic on Twitter in case you couldn't follow all of those names I read very quickly. But again, Oklahoma, welcome to the number one spot. You usurp North Carolina for the first time this season since before the national indoors that someone not named North Carolina has held the top spot in our rankings. With that in mind, let's preview the final week of non-NCAA tournament play here in the 2022 college tennis season. Two big ones we've got our eyes on. Big Ten tournament happening in Iowa City. Northwestern Wisconsin, your 3 and 4 seeds. Obviously, for Wisconsin, they're one of the teams with need to make the semifinals probably to ensure their spot in the NCAA tournament. Right now, they're number 43 in the projected ranking, 16 and 8 overall. Illinois 48, Nebraska's 55. I'll put Minnesota on my end of realm of possibility because I think that's a pretty solid squad. They're 57 in the rankings. I mean, those are the four teams, Wisconsin through Minnesota, on bubble watch. That's certainly one fascinating detail to watch for. What are you looking for over in Iowa City?
Yeah, it's bubble watch and then final watch for me.
Yeah.
Right. It's which of those teams can go on a run and try and secure their spot. Illinois I have as a dark horse here. I think they're in the Wisconsin quarter, so that could be a win and you're in type situation. And look, I'm looking forward to what should probably be a Michigan Ohio State rematch.
Yeah, I mean, and it was a 4-3 match. Wolverines came so close, obviously, to winning that one in Columbus, and now it's neutral site, probably outdoors this time. I mean, they're down 1-0. They're going to drop the doubles point, but this team scraps. That's going to be very fun. And again, Illinois with and Duong and the freshmen they have, like that Wisconsin match has 4-3 written all over it if it does happen.
100%.
So that's a cross-off match. Winning, you're in. Losing, you're probably not. It's going to be fun to watch all the action in Iowa City. West Coast action. Got the West Coast Conference, obviously Pepperdine, your favorites to capture the conference title, but certainly LMU looking forward, 20-2 LMU looking forward to another shot at Pepperdine. San Diego right now, 15 and 5 overall, 45 in the projected rankings. They are just outside of the NCAA tournament. Those are the three teams with postseason aspirations. Does San Diego need to beat LMU to work their way in that hypothetical semifinal match? I mean, obviously Pepperdine, heavy favorite to win this event. Yep. Talk to me about the West Coast Conference.
Yeah, I assume they do, right? If they're sitting at 45, they probably need to win. I don't think the draw is out for this yet. That's why the what to watch is TBD. But yeah, I mean, Pepperdine's a heavy favorite. They rolled through the regular season. They just knocked off San Diego. LMU, right? They've had an incredible season. I'm curious to see the LMU San Diego matchup, which LMU, I believe, won in the regular season. If we get a rematch against Pepperdine, and we'll see what form Pepperdine is in.
Yeah, again, it's crazy to say. Not much college tennis to watch this weekend. Enjoy the calmness before the storm. This is one of those weekends where, it's finally springtime. Maybe you haven't I don't know. What's the springtime equivalent? It's not an apple orchard. That's fall. Or pumpkin picking. That's fall. Whatever.
Cherry blossoms in DC.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's go with that. Or, maybe it's finally nice enough for that lake day. You've got a buddy, you can go down to the water with the families, whatever it is. Maybe this is the weekend to get that out of the way because the next 2 weekends you're booked, folks, with all the college tennis action that's going to unfold. But again, that's our look at the week ahead. And that's week 15 here in the 2022 college tennis season. Now, no broadcast for me to plug this weekend either. I do believe I'm going to be headed up to Madison for the Big Ten men's action. I need to see Michigan versus Ohio State at some point in person. And I do, it's 6 hours away, which is the vomit zone. But I also have the kicker of my best friend growing up goes to vet school at Wisconsin. And so it's like, not only do I have the Michigan-Wisconsin match, Michigan, Ohio State match, excuse me. Or maybe Michigan, Wisconsin. Michigan, Wisconsin would be the semifinals. They're the number 3 seed after that COVID cancellation. But I also get to see my buddy. Like, it's a confluence of factors that has me driving that 6 hours. That said, any final thoughts from you, Jay, before we wrap today's show?
No, you're right. It's absolutely the calm before the storm.
Yeah.
And again, when we chat, we are going to have the NCAA draws. So we'll bookend the conversation with that.
And the other thing we should do next week, I know the draw preview is going to be massive. Maybe we'll have to double up. Mailbag. We're doing a mailbag segment before the start of the NCAA tournament. And maybe we can make this a separate show. Remind me to tweet it out. We'll both tweet it out. Any of you listeners who have questions for us entering the NCAA tournament, I'll do my best to secure the lineups and everything for us so we have all that information in front of us. But let's do a mailbag. As we wrap this 2022 college tennis season, what are the questions you all have on your mind as we head towards postseason play? We want to hear them. We'll do our best to answer them on next week's show. But with that said, a shout out as always to our friends at SwingVision and Turna, the lifeblood who make this show possible. Learn more about SwingVision by clicking on the link in the description to this app. Learn more about Turna by emailing them at sales@uniquesports.com. A shout out as always to super producer Daniel Westoff on the ones and twos who makes all of this content possible. And I can already hear him in the room across from me thinking, you're going to do a mailbag and a draw preview in a single show. What should I just book an entire evening? Because that sounds like 3 hours. But with all of that said, for my fantastic co-host, John J. Parsons, our super producer, Daniel Westoff, our friends at SwingVision and Turn, and from all of us here at both Cracked Racquets and the Tennis Channel Podcast Network, I'm your host, Alex Gruskin. Jay, what do we tell the people?
Hey, great shot.
And we will see you all next week for NCAA tournament play. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.